I'm Mark Maxwell. This is The Record. We planned a different show today. On Thursday, July 16, we offered former Congresswoman Cori Bush this entire program. It's something you don't often see. Every minute of it. Unedited, meaning whatever she would say would air in full. Whatever I ask would air in full. No cuts, no context arguments. We made that offer to her in writing, to her press secretary. We followed up again, July 24th, and once more on the 28th, 29th, and the 30th. Wesley Bell, the incumbent she's challenging, has sat in this chair, in this studio, and has taken our questions at least 3 times we counted as an incumbent. I've scrutinized his votes about ICE, military spending. I've challenged his independence from AIPAC donors. I've tested his knowledge of the tornado relief systems in Congress. We wanted her side of every question you're wondering about in this race. It was her choice to leave this chair empty instead. So here's how this works. Her votes, her campaign filings, her own words, and ours too, so you can check us too. Let's start with May 16. The tornado cuts through North St. Louis, and Cori Bush did show up. Her organization handing out tarps, food, diapers, toiletries. People in those neighborhoods will tell you they saw her there. That's part of the record, and we'll mention it first. But behind the relief effort, paperwork. 2 organizations, a political action committee and a nonprofit, Politivist Power Incorporated, organized under the section 501c4 of the tax code. Now, here's why that section number matters. A PAC reports its donors to the federal government. You can look them up right now. A 501c4 does not. It can raise unlimited money and never tell you where a dollar of it came from. That's no accusation. That's just the tax code, the way it's written. Now a word about our process, because if we're asking her to show her work, we should show you ours. On July 8, we sent her campaign-specific questions in writing. These are not gotchas. These kinds of questions, like how much money came in? Where did it go? Who got paid? For 6 days, no answer. So on July 13, at the public event, I asked her in person. We're going to play you the exchange so you can judge it for yourself. How much did you take in, and where did it go?
You know what? You have been told multiple times that that is a PAC that I cannot speak to as a candidate.
I'm sorry for the confusion. This was not about the PAC. This
Yes.
was actually about the you called it a 501c4 in emails and said it was a charity?
I cannot speak to. I can speak to what I just did. That's what I can speak to.
Just to clarify, this question is about Politivist Power, Inc.
Mr. Maxwell,
You
can ask
Well,
questions.
it's not an-
I have.
Mr. Maxwell.
You can, yes, absolutely.
Can you just explain to the average voter why money moving from that nonprofit, a dark money nonprofit, into a PAC, then paying you, isn't what it looks like?
You have been instructed already, and I'm not trying to have a thing between you and I, because this is about an endorsement that we have.
She said she couldn't speak to it. Her staff moved the room along. That was July 13. 11 days later, on her own Facebook page, she spoke to it.
Between the tornado hitting St. Louis on May 16, 25, and me stepping away from both the PAC and the C4 just a few months later, on July 31st, 2025, these organizations were able to raise money through a handful of grassroots donations. We're talking about the same grassroots fundraising emails that you receive in your inbox all the time. Now, I can't speak to all of the financial history for any organizations that I haven't been a part of in nearly a year. But I can tell you that I remember these emails raising just over $3,000. Funds from those grassroots emails were used for tornado recovery, to tarps, non-perishable food items, toiletries, diapers, and yes, a small stipend equivalent to less than that of a part-time job, so we could keep doing the work full-time right here on the ground, helping our community.
Okay, so here's what she confirmed. She took a stipend from the nonprofit. She says the fundraising emails brought in just over $3,000. She characterizes the stipend as less than a part-time job. That's her definition of it, not a dollar amount. And she didn't dispute any of the figures that we reported. We checked whether any law, any rule, any FEC regulation would prevent her from saying all of that at the podium July 13th. Nothing did. At the podium, she couldn't speak to it. 11 days later, she did, in a format that didn't have any follow-up questions after it. One more document. The Missouri Attorney General has sent the nonprofit what it's calling a civil investigative demand. Under Missouri law, that's a legal demand to hand over records. In many states, the closest comparison is a subpoena. Here's where we're going to be careful, because the law is careful. A demand for records is not a criminal charge, not a civil charge. It's not even a finding of wrongdoing. It's just an investigative tool. Sometimes investigations end with nothing. But here, Bush's response didn't address the records. It addressed the Republican who sent the demand, Catherine Hanaway. Bush noted she was appointed to that job, not elected. That's true. So was our reporting. And so is the AG's demand. All those facts can stand there together. And on Tuesday, you get to weigh them at the ballot box. When we come back, a look at Wesley Bell's term in Congress and how he answers for his results and his rhetoric. Welcome back to the show that we didn't want to bring you, the one that we're reluctantly putting on the air. We wanted Cori Bush here in studio to answer all these big questions, talk about the big issues, move on from the footprints and the definitions and get to the big stuff. She declined to join us here in studio. We were able to catch up with her opponent on the campaign trail. Here's our conversation with Wesley Bell Thursday at noon, 5 days from the election. Congressman, you were a prosecutor. You know what the word indict means. On CNN earlier this month, you called your opponent a scam artist who's enriching herself. The Office of Congressional Ethics reviewed those payments, closed the case, never brought a charge against her. So I want to be precise. Are you saying that the Ethics Office got it wrong, yes or no?
What I'm saying is that when you create a 501c4 and state that it's about disaster relief and help folks, move that money into a PAC and then pay yourself, that is a scam. Now, we're seeing scams at the highest office in the land that are going unprosecuted. But as a former prosecutor, I know a scam when I see one.
Ed Martin's office indicted Mrs. Bush's husband over a pandemic loan. There was a 9-day trial, a hung jury. Charges were dismissed. There was no conviction. You've spent a career warning about overcharging people who can't fight back. Does a man who beat those charges deserve to hear a former prosecutor call his wife a criminal on national TV?
I didn't call anyone a criminal.
Scam artist.
I don't make it, here's the thing. If you use the job to enrich yourself, and when you're in the job, you don't show up to the job, that is a disqualifier. And so at this point, we are 5 days from the election. The voters can decide for themselves. But what I'm saying is that my focus has been on working for the people of this region. I live on my salary, but my opponent, those things, paying herself and in using this job and campaigning to enrich herself, the facts are there. Matter of fact, you've reported on it.
Last month, on the recovery money for St. Louis, you said that, quote, there are no CDBG funds. That's true because the Congress that you serve in hasn't sent them. Congresswoman Bush saw you, if I can finish my question, Congresswoman Bush saw you take questions on this originally at a press event a while back, and her takeaway was that you didn't understand the program. So I wonder, can you just clarify one specific action that you've taken to get those HUD disaster relief funds to North City?
I'll give you several. One is we've been working with appropriators because there are no supplemental funds that are allocated and approved through appropriations for 2025. It requires an appropriation bill, but that also has to be signed by the president. And because Republicans are in the majority, the president has been clear what his priorities are on supplemental funding, and that's his unauthorized war in Iran. It's for his $1.8 billion vanity ballroom and for his $1.6 billion slush fund. So that's why taking the majority is so important, so that we can get this legislation and get these types of bills that align with our values and the needs of our constituents to the House floor. But currently, unless the president signs any appropriation bill, the disaster relief process that we have currently in the country is such that this is the way it works. Now, what we've done is started to introduce legislation to reform and overhaul that process, and we're going to continue introducing legislation because I don't think any American that has been the victim of a natural disaster, whether they're Democrat, Republican, independent, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, or what have you, should, if they have been impacted by a natural disaster, we need to rally around Americans and get them the help that they need.
A quick follow-up, because I think it connects the dots on this. You told CNN on that same interview that this was an unauthorized war in Iran, and that the cost to pay for it could have otherwise paid for the health care subsidies that you wanted. So here's my question. If House leadership brings a supplemental to the floor to pay for that Iran operation with no HUD disaster money for St. Louis in it, do you vote for it anyways?
To pay for the Iran war? Well, right now, and I serve on the Armed Services Committee. I was recently appointed to the Foreign Affairs Committee. And there are 3 questions that need to be answered anytime that we're going to take our troops into war. Why are we doing it? What are the objectives? And what is the exit strategy? And I avail myself of the classified briefing process. I serve on the committees that are relevant to these issues, and I have left with none of those questions answered and 10 more unanswered questions. And so until we see the intelligence, and the administration is transparent that this war is necessary to protect our national security and our allies, I'm a no. Now now let's take the second part of that question. I don't think funding for natural disasters should be tied to anything. This isn't a Democrat or Republican issue. When we see the wildfires that hit California, when we see the hurricanes that hit the Gulf Coast states every year, these natural disasters hit all people, Republican, Democrat, you name it. And so we need to make certain that those not only are FEMA funds fully funded so that folks get the help they need, but currently our supplemental funding pots are not permanent line items in our budget. They have to be funded based on, appropriations bills. I think that they should be permanent line items in our budget because we got to make sure that folks that need the help get it.
I guess that's my question. Does House leadership know that you might consider, even if you don't like the way it happens, the way the sausage is made, if this supplemental could become the vehicle for HUD disaster funds, would you advocate for that? Would you draw a red line and get that disaster money in the supplemental bill?
I'd need to see the legislation. And so, hypothetically, if we can get disaster relief, obviously that would be something that I would want to strongly consider. But at what cost? And what are we, I would need to see the legislation. But obviously, we want to do everything we can to get folks the help that they need because too many people are struggling with unmet needs currently.
Before the break, we traced the money behind the volunteer tornado relief effort. Now the bigger question, the one Cori Bush herself puts at the center of this race on Tuesday. Who delivers best for St. Louis? She answers that question with this ad.
While we were still hurting, he abandoned us, jetting off to Israel with AIPAC. St. Louis deserves a fighter. In 2022, when the floods hit, I brought over $80 million home for relief.
No, those are our headlines from KSDK right there in her ad. But two claims in there, take them in order. First, quote, I brought over $80 million home. We looked at what that money actually was. Under the Biden administration, with Democrats in the majority, a nationwide disaster relief measure did pass through Congress, not just through FEMA, but through HUD as well. We've reported those numbers on this program before. Those are the headlines you saw in her ad. This time, FEMA and the Small Business Administration have kicked in. Congress, through HUD, has not. Bell blames Republicans in the majority and in the White House, a political reality that is hard to deny. The second claim there, that Wesley Bell failed to deliver. Her proof, once again, our tape on this program, May 14, when I asked Bell whether he'd done anything, filed a bill, sponsored a resolution, delivered a floor speech, staged a press conference, anything at all to try to pursue HUD disaster housing money. Take a look.
Wesley Bell used the death and devastation right here in St. Louis for nothing more than a photo op with a box, and then failed to deliver the necessary funding to help. Just look.
Did you know that HUD money was available? And if so, did you ever file a bill? Did you sponsor a resolution? Did you hold a press conference? Did you speak out on the House floor? Did you do anything to draw awareness to this HUD money?
So you're talking about one bucket of money when there are several buckets of money that can be distributed at any time.
Maybe you didn't like his answer to that question. The difference between the two candidates on this question, though, isn't the answers alone. It's that one of the candidates keeps showing up to answer them. Bush's theory of this race is that she'd be more effective than Wesley Bell in a Congress where Democrats are in the minority. Okay, so let's put that theory to someone who counted votes in that chamber longer than anyone alive, and who, full disclosure up front, did endorse last week Wesley Bell.
It's important to be a team player when you are there. You make your suggestions, you have your say. You have to see the reality of the United States Senate. And for those who were there at the time who said, unless I get everything I want, I'm not going to be with the Democrats. Mr. Bell comes in as a effective from the start legislator. He comes there not to rant, but to legislate.
That's Nancy Pelosi's endorsement talking. You can weigh it as just that, an endorsement. But the assessment underneath it, that Bush's approach as a politivist cost her votes that she couldn't spare in close roll calls, that's something we can evaluate. So we did that. We tried to test it. We asked Nancy Pelosi about Cori Bush's prior claim that she brought $2 billion back to St. Louis through the American Rescue Plan, a bill that passed just weeks after she first arrived in Congress. Pelosi said that number seemed excessive. House Democrat Representative Emanuel Cleaver, standing just behind her, concurred. A sign in the background of a press conference sparks a question that's been evolving for thousands of years: the history of healthcare as a human right, when we check the record. A viewer named Desmond left a question under one of my posts online this week. It's a good question. It's an actual question, which on the internet is rare enough to be worth stopping for these days. He saw this sign at Nancy Pelosi's endorsement of Wesley Bell, and he asked, when did healthcare start becoming a human right? He says he's just trying to track that down historically. All right, I could read you the Hippocratic Oath. I could read you the Declaration of Independence and do 4 minutes on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And maybe then I could even tell you what the founders really meant, which is a thing people say on TV when they're about to tell you what they really meant. I'm not going to do that. Here's the actual record. It's short, and nobody really ever reads it. The paper trail. 1944, Franklin Roosevelt, Second Bill of Rights, the right to adequate medical care. 1946, the World Health Organization's founding charter. 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 25. 1966, the International Covenant, Article 12. The U.S. signed that one in 1977 and has never ratified it, which is its own answer to your question in a way. So that's the history, at least the early part, the 1940s. That's when the phrase enters into the law books, written by people who had just finished watching what a century looks like when a society decides that some lives count less than others. But Desmond, I also read your profile. You describe yourself as a Christ-loving, God-fearing Christian. I'm not going to pretend that's not the more interesting conversation, so let's have that one. Because the paper trail on that side is about 3,000 years longer. You remember, the Good Samaritan. Guy finds a stranger half dead in a ditch, binds the wounds up, puts him on his own animal, carries him to an inn, pays the innkeeper that 2 pence, and then, this is the part I want you to sit with, tells the innkeeper, whatever else he runs up, I'll cover it when I come back. Just put it on my tab. That's not charity. That's an open-ended third-party payment guarantee for a man he'd never met before. I went back through, scouring, looking for the means test in there. Couldn't find one. There's no verse where he checks whether the guy's in a ditch was in network. There's also Leviticus 13, priest running a mandatory diagnostic and quarantine code. That's public health administered by the state religious authority. Deuteronomy 23, camp sanitation by decree. Exodus 21, you injure somebody, you pay for his healing and the time he lost. Third-party liability for medical costs and lost wages, that was in the Bronze Age. Psalm 41, the Lord strengthens him who considers the poor. And then the Gospels, where the guy whose name you post in your profile healed all manner of sickness and disease among the people. Matthew 4, Matthew 9, Luke 9, healed them that had need of healing. That's quite a coverage standard upgrade. There were the 10 lepers in Luke 17, heals all 10. 9 of them don't even come back to say thanks. 9 out of 10. No gratitude, no copay. He healed them anyway. In Matthew 25, where the whole final accounting comes down to one line, I was sick and you visited me. And Desmond, before you write all that off as ancient history, people have been trying to build a system out of it for 400 years. England taxed every parish in 1601 to care for the sick poor. Nobody called it socialism, they called it the law. Germany made health insurance compulsory in 1883, and the man who signed it then, Otto von Bismarck, a Prussian aristocrat who was not trying to start a revolution, he was trying to stop one. Both of them were building on hospitals the church put up first. The Hotel Dieu, the hostel of God. Because that's who they thought was staying there. I was sick, and you visited me. So the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Desmond, I'm going to ask you the only version of this question that matters. Not the abstract philosophy question or the obscure historical exploration. If it's you, or your wife, or your kid, and the diagnosis is the bad one, and the letter comes back denied, what would you have us do with you? Walk on by? Or do something about it? I don't know the answer to the government part. That's a genuinely hard question. And anybody who tells you it's easy is probably selling you something. But you asked when healthcare became a human right. 1944, 46, 48. The idea is a lot older than that. From the sound of it, you probably already own the book. That's our show. Until next time, we're off the record.